Hello everybody and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm going to look at how to do A01 on A-level politics questions. So it's used across all the different question types and it makes up a substantial part of the mark. Now this video is part of my playlist on A-level politics, and I'm going to do within that a series of 3 videos. This one on A01, I'm going to do videos on A02 and A03 as well, to show how all the different elements of the mark schemes, all the different areas of assessment are done across A-level politics. So A01 is asking you to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of political institutions, processes, concepts, theories and issues. So in essence, it's the part of the mark scheme that requires you to know stuff and to demonstrate your understanding of political terminologies, concepts and ideas. So it's about being able to define the stuff that the questions are asking about, being able to define the technical language that you use. And it's about being able to bring in examples to support your arguments and what you're saying. So the key is having lots of good examples and having nice, clear and detailed explanations. A01 is worth 10 of the 30 marks in the source questions. It's worth 10 of the 30 marks in the essays. In the ideas questions, it's worth 8 of the 24. And then in component 3, the 12 mark questions, question 1 is worth 6 of the 12. Question 2, it's worth 6 of the 12. So it really is a substantive part of the mark scheme. But it's probably the easiest one to pick the marks up, assuming you've got a good way of making sure you can remember lots of detail. On the source questions, you need to show understanding by extracting points and counterpoints from the source. So that's part of the understanding mark. You should stick very much to the arguments that are in the source, because you don't get any A02 or any 3 marks for anything that's not in the source. The guidance from the exam board then says you should enhance and exemplify the above points using own knowledge and understanding. Students are not required to bring in additional points for or against from own knowledge. So the point is there, and you just need to build on it from your own knowledge and bring in those examples. Now, one of the interesting things on this, and in a way quite a frustrating thing, is if you go through the mark scheme, you identify the bits which is A01 as you go through. Well, level 1, it kind of makes sense. It says superficial. So if you don't know very much, you really don't know anything specific, you're going to get level 1. Level 5 is fairly straightforward, not easy to do, but fairly clear on what it wants you to do. Thorough and in-depth knowledge. Okay, so somebody who knows absolutely tons is going to get level 5, and somebody who knows absolutely sod all is going to get level 1. So in the middle, we've got where most people end up, which are levels 2, 3 and 4. Well, what it then tells us is level 2 is some accurate understanding, level 3 is mostly accurate understanding, and level 4 is accurate understanding. Well, accurate doesn't really tell us about the important bit which ends up differentiating most people's marks, because someone can write something that's completely accurate, there's just not very much of it, and that isn't going to get you level 4. You're not going to turn around to a teacher marking it or an examiner and go, but it's accurate, everything I've said there is true. And they go, yeah, but you haven't explained it in any detail and there's not a lot of it. So this gives us the difficulty of trying to work out level 2 to 4, and this is always a struggle for any teacher marking it. It's looking at, well, how much depth is good level depth for those different levels. And it's that bit that we're going to try and show, and what I'm going to show going through the video is a series of bits which I think it would be right near the top of it. They would be kind of definitely level 4, probably level 5 in terms of the level of detail that they give. Now, the further you fall away from that and the less specific your examples are, the less detailed your information is, and the further you'll fall down it. But if you are backing everything up with at least some detail, then that should get you at least into level 2. If it's pretty decent detail, it's kind of what should be the case with level 3 is it should be what you would expect to see, a decent answer. Level 4 should be a good answer, and level 5 should be exceptional. And essentially what we're doing in A01 is we're applying that to the level of detail given. So what would it look like on a source question? Well, I've looked at a source question. It's about the possibility of using proportional representation in the UK. And there's a point in the source that says proportional representation would encourage more people to vote, improving the chances of a more reflective parliament. So what would strong A01, kind of level 5 A01 on this look like? Right, so the point that would be in the previous bit, I go, this is supported by the frequently low turnout in UK general elections. This dropped below 60% in 2001, although improving, still sees a significant number of people not voting, so 33% in 2019. The fact that these major parties are so overrepresented by first past the post is a clear factor in this. In 2019, the Conservatives gained an 80-seat majority in the Commons, having received just 43.6% of the vote. The Lib Dems received 11.6% of the vote, but less than 2% of the seats. In 2015, UKIP received over 4 million votes, but won only 1 seat. Voter turnout is even lower in safe seats, as people whose preferred candidate has no chance of winning see no point in voting. And then you would go into your A02 and A03 bits. So the idea of that is, as it should be, essentially kind of level 5, because that not all questions lend themselves to that one in particular, because it's about turnout. Then there's loads of stats and stuff that you could throw at it. Obviously, I'm doing this as a teacher, sat at home with books and everything available to me, and therefore the level of precision in there is really high. But we have seen stuff at this kind of level from students. Now, I think you could definitely get level 4 without quite the kind of precision of these kind of statistics. But if you've got the flavour of that, even with the lack of precision, then you are going to get a decent mark. That is really showing something at the very, very top end. In the 30-mark essays, the demands are really very similar. I would say in some ways it's slightly higher, because you don't have the source to back you up, so to give you this starting point. And so part of what you're doing is selecting arguments, and you can actually end up penalising yourself in A01 if you don't select relevant arguments, because then the detail that you give won't be relevant, and therefore it won't score as highly in level 1. You should try for 3 points on each side, normally interlinked points, to try and maximise the credit you'll get in range. And range has got to be part of any A01 mark, because it's about knowledge, and the range of knowledge has got to be important, as well as the depth. And a really key part of A01 as well is not forgetting to define and explain political terms. I often have this issue with my students when they're writing stuff for me, because I've taught them some terminology, and then they're writing an essay and they're using that terminology, and of course they know that I know it because I told it to them, so they don't feel the need to explain it. But you have to remember, in terms of assessment, you are showing off what you know. So don't just state that first past the post is the system used. Actually explain what first past the post is and how it works. And the same goes for all kinds of concepts and ideas and terms. So when you are using that political language that you have been taught and that you have learned loads of different bits of it, make sure you explain what it is. Again, the mark scheme range it is kind of the same as is expected in the source question. It goes from superficial at level 1 to thorough and in-depth at level 5. And again, the problem is that blurred bit in the middle, because again, what we generally don't see is differences in accuracy. We see differences in depth. Again, the more specific and well selected your examples are, the higher your mark will be. One essay that I've looked at is an essay about the fact that only the Conservatives and the Labour parties really matter, and this is, again, it's an example of some A01 that might come out of that essay. The funding, wealth and organisation of the Conservative and Labour parties cannot be matched by the other parties. The Conservative Party is far wealthier than the other parties, with over 19.3 million donations going into the 2019 election. The Labour Party received 5.4 million, whilst the Lib Dems received only 1.2 million. The Labour Party has far more members than the other parties, over 500,000. The Conservatives have around 150,000, whilst the Lib Dems have about half as many as the Conservatives. And then you get into the A02 bit. The money and membership allows the two main parties to operate on a national scale and mobilise support, and then you do all your evaluation and assessment stuff going through A02 and into A03. So again, this is a bit of the answer that has given me a chance to throw in some statistics. Again, if I'm just saying the Conservative Party is far wealthier than the other parties, and the Labour Party has far more members than the parties, then I'm still going to get credit for that in A01, but I might be looking something more around level 3, 4 rather than level 5, where I've got that absolute precision. And that can be the bit where if your teacher keeps coming back to you and saying, look, you need more detail, then this is the kind of thing that they mean. Or to my students, when I tell you you need more detail, this is what I mean. So it's trying to get your head around, well, actually, how much can I retain of this? And it's not you don't, it's not marked negatively, so you don't lose marks for not having really precise kind of statistical data and stuff like that. And they're not, statistical data won't work for everything, but not having stuff like this will hold you down a bit. If you've got that, you've read that paragraph without the numbers in it, it would still be a good paragraph. It just wouldn't score level 5, I don't think. Now, this next one is we're going to look at ideas. And the mark scheme is similar again to the 30-mark essays and 30-mark source questions, but there's a slight twist. Obviously, you're going to be dealing with a lot more concept in these, and so it's really important you show you understand what they are. But here I think you've got a real advantage, because you're going to go in knowing you need to be able to define liberalism, socialism, conservatism, and then whatever your non-core ideology is. So the one we do is nationalism. So one of the things I would say to all my students is, well, make sure you've got a really good definition of conservatism and liberalism and socialism and nationalism, so you can get and you can define that in your essay. And also make sure you've got it for all the sub parts of the ideology. So make sure you can explain what classical liberalism is, what modern liberalism is, and any of the key ideas that you then come across when you're doing your different themes. So your economy, society, state, and human nature. So for example, if you're doing liberalism and you're doing economics, well, modern liberals believe in Keynesian economics, so you need to make sure you've got a definition of Keynesian economics that you'll be able to put into your essay nice and smoothly. Similarly, you'll have to have a definition of, let's say, fair economics, but doing your classical liberals, and you have that ready to put in. So don't just say, and modern liberals believe in Keynesian economics. Say, classical liberals believed in Keynesian economics, which is. And if you've got that ready, and you can essentially prep really well for this, for any exam or timed piece of work, by making sure, right, actually, I'm going to go through and I'm going to make sure I've nailed those concepts. Do flashcards or something similar to that. It's a really good method of making sure you've got those off pat. Right. Most examples, however, are going to come from the ideas of the key thinkers. And again, in preparing for doing a 24-mark ideas essay, making sure you know what the key thinkers say about different stuff is really important. So whilst actually the best kind of super up-to-date example is what you really want in a 30-mark source or a 30-mark essay, in a 24-mark one, it's not the most up-to-date example. It's something that comes out and shows that depth of understanding of the key thinker. So if I've got a question on socialists and the economy, then what might this look like? Well, this is, again, my example. All socialists attach importance to how the economy operates as essential in setting out the basic structure of society and the life chances of the people. For example, Marx and Engels wrote about economic determinism. This means that everything in a society is determined, made to be, by the economic system the country has. If a country has a capitalist economic system, then this will mean that competition and equality will permeate all aspects of society. If a country has a socialist economic system, then this will promote equality and fraternity, meaning that people will look out for each other and strive for the common good. And then you move on to your comparative bit. Other socialists, such as Crossland, would agree with this, and then you put in your A02, bit of A02, a comparison, and then you put in your next bit, your A01, where you're talking about what Crossland believes. So on this, you say this is a different type of knowledge. This isn't me throwing a load of kind of up-to-date statistics or numbers about what's going on, or really recent examples of things that happen. This is me showing the depth of my understanding of Karl Marx's ideas on economic determinism. And what I've not done is I've not stopped at any point. I'm just going to go, well, this is the case for Marx because he believes in economic determinism, and moved on. And again, students often will do that. I've gone through and explained it a bit further. This means everything in society is made by an economic system a country has. And again, decent answer, probably get about level 3, could probably stop at about there. but then I've gone on further and explained how you get to that point. So how capitalism would, according to Marx, affect the rest of society, how socialism, according to Marx, would affect the rest of society. And it's that depth that moves you up from kind of in the middle levels, around level 3, up to level 5. On component 3, and we do the US one, you get the 2 12-mark questions. The first one will ask you to examine the ways, and you need to provide examples from the US and linked examples from the UK. So in the spec it says, select and build on A01 points for development at the next level of A02 analysis. These lines of evidence have to be clear, focused, and above all accurate. So you can't just make stuff up. And again, the mark scheme looks almost identical in terms of the descriptors are level 1, which is going to be superficial, to level 5, which is going to be really detailed and precise. And again, we've got that bit of that accuracy in the middle. And again, I don't often get it, so I'm marking one point and go, well, point 1 was really good, argument 2 was wrong, argument 3 was okay. It tends to be, again, it's that bit with depth. So what will this look like? So again, on this one, I'm looking at a question about the powers of the legislatures in the UK and the US being limited in different ways. So powers are distributed less equally in the UK than in the US. The House of Lords can only delay legislation for up to 1 year. It cannot veto a bill that has passed in the House of Commons. Its powers are even more limited on some bills, as it cannot challenge finance bills or any bills that bring forward any promises made in the government's as the majority party in the House of Commons manifesto. This is not the case in the US, and there's a bit of kind of comparison bit in black, and then we go back into the A02 stuff in A01 stuff in blue. The Senate has specific powers over appointments and treaties, whilst the House, and again it goes to the precise bits. Now this is one where I kind of looked at it and go, well, that is really quite good, but it's not absolutely perfect in terms of A01. Because the basic theory and everything in there is absolutely right. And I think this is possibly more level 4. And what would push it into level 5 might be giving an example. One of the difficulties actually with this bit is because so much of the modern examples in the UK contradict the point that I'm making. Because, so for example, Boris Johnson lost this huge string of votes early on in his time in office. And so actually sometimes the recent events in the UK or definitely in a lot of cases at the moment the US can be slightly unhelpful, because they're actually the exceptions that prove the rules rather than the rules as things have been previously. So I think this is pretty good. I think this is a good solid level 4, but it's maybe not got that. It just needs that little example in there that would push it into level 5. The final type of question is question 2 on the component 3, which is the second of the 12-mark questions. The STEM is analyse. It requires a point showing knowledge and understanding. These must be precise, accurate, and relevant again. And you also need to show that you understand at least one of the comparative theories, and now you need to explain and apply that. So again, a bit like we talked about going into the ideology questions, the ideas questions, go in with a kind of learned definition, explanation of the 3 comparative theories. So you are going to have to use at least one of them in your answer. So make sure you can clearly explain what they are. And that kind of prep and memorizing that will be really helpful. So what would it look like? Well, on a question comparing the powers of the US and UK Parliament, so the US Congress is considered to have more significant legislative powers than the UK Parliament because separation of powers give it independence from the executive. The US Congress can override any presidential veto over legislation, as done to Trump's veto in the Defense Act of 2020. So again, I've got a really precise, up-to-date example, and that is again another symbol of a really high scoring mark. And there's a bit of an analysis how the UK can't do this. In the UK, the executive is in the form of the PM and cabinet, is made up of members of the same party that control the House of Commons. This means that in normal circumstances, the government can guarantee the passing of their legislation, especially when the government have a strong majority, like the Conservative Party does at the moment, and the government says 80 seats. Here we can apply the structural approach as the difference stems from the different systems created by the respective constitutions. And again, to really push this off and make this absolutely excellent, I would then go on to a bit of explanation, filling out exactly what the structural approach is and how it's about the systems, and it's about the structure of how the political systems are built, and therefore fundamentally this difference between Congress and Parliament comes down to the structures of the two political systems. It is the case that the US Congress in this method, in this way, has more power in terms of legislative power in contrast to the executive than it does in the UK. So I hope that's been helpful in terms of giving you some example stuff. So this video, again, as I say, is part of my series on A-level politics, where I'm aiming to cover the entire specification and to give as many helpful hints and tips as I can in terms of answering the different types of questions. There are individual videos done already on how to do individual question types, and I will be adding to this little bit on the AOs, so give you again a bit more example of AOs written, so you can think about exactly what it is you might need to fine tune if you're getting feedback that says, right, it's A01 that's letting you down, or it's A02 that's letting you down, or it's A03 that's letting you down. So make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and therefore when I add the other ones about the AOs, you'll get those as well. Thank you very much for watching.